uğruna elin adamını beni orta yerinden çatlatıyor. Ağzında sakızı şişirip şişirip arsız arsız patlatıyor. Biz böyle mi gördük babamızdan?
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Submerged Podcast. I'm Camila and this is my dad Benji. If you haven't checked us out before, welcome to our channel. And if you have, we hope you enjoy this episode. It's a long time coming.
Yeah, it's been a while. Happy New Year to a lot of people because the last time we left them off was actually on a New Year's show. It was a nice break, obviously. Always good to take a step back, digest what happened. But this one's been a long time coming. Why it's been a long time coming? Because we mentioned our trip to Turkey, I think, in the last podcast episode, and really, I think it was good to spend a bit 3-4 months digesting, about 3 months, digesting what we went through, what we saw, the family experience, and we wanted to pay respect to this beautiful country, mysterious in some ways, controversial in others. Obviously, if you, there's a little inside joke here. Camila, you're dressed in black. I'm dressed in black and I've got my Turkish tea shirt, and you can see the decorations here with the chai, the tea, which is part of their culture. But I did pretty well because I'm dressed in black. My underwear is black, even though you can't see that. And I've got an undercut haircut, the only thing, and a beard. So the only thing I'm missing is maybe a cigarette, because pretty much that's all the kids.
Everyone did.
Yeah,
Everyone
that's all they dress in black. They got undercut haircuts, and everybody bloody smokes. But it's part of the charm, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. So and by the way, so if you've been living under a rock, you will have, you will not have noticed that the importance and also the amount of attention this country has gotten. To the point that the other day on the soccer match of Turkey versus Croatia, they even said we can no longer call it Turkey. They're calling it Turkiye, which is the correct.
Right.
Because they don't want to be associated to a bloody bird, and especially an American Thanksgiving bird, right?
Yes.
Although, by the way, they eat turkey at Christmas.
That's true.
That's true. So, Turkiye, we love it or we love you is the episode, but we're gonna break it up a bit because this is a lot of Christmas gifts here.
Yeah.
So, a voyage of first time for you, for me, for Mom, Marcos, Mateo. What were your overall impressions of this country? And then after that, maybe we dig deeper into explaining to folks what the hell is Turkiye,
Yeah.
and set the stage for what we experience.
Right. I mean, overall, I thought it was a great trip, and it was definitely a bit of a culture shock at first. I've never been to Europe and Asia, I guess, if you look at the geography of it, but it was definitely interesting to meet different people and see how they live their lives, because it's very different as to how people here in the U.S. live. But I want to say it's a hidden gem because people are aware of what Turkey is, I guess, but also I guess not. But I thought it was a hidden gem because the trip didn't turn out as I expected it to be, and meeting different people and just talking to different people and just the food. I was like, oh. Yeah,
we're
whoa.
gonna talk a lot about food, as you know, in the Lopinto family. It's all about what we're eating and the experience that comes with, and we certainly had a lot of culinary firsts.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we maybe discovered certain foods we knew about that we had experienced either through us going to the.
It tasted better.
No, obviously, yes, it always does in the same country. But continue. So these a kind of a feel first, but I think also where you were going with this hidden gem is that yes, you go to people's Instagram accounts, you go to TikTok, and it's always the same thing.
The same, though.
They always want to show you, well, here I am in this neighborhood. Yes, it's beautiful, and yes, we went to those neighborhoods, and yes, but there's also something to be said, and I think we'll talk about that in part 3 about getting off the beaten path. Right?
Right.
Being your own person, and then forget about the tour guides, and get more individual with it, right? Because I think we had a lot of great experiences doing that.
Yeah, there was a lot of as people say, Instagrammable spots where everybody was going, and they were beautiful, but if you just kind of like go a few streets down, you find yourself in a completely different world. And I think that was what was so special about this trip. It was just like everywhere you went, it was just something new and something different and something fun and something new to look at. So you were always constantly
Something delicious.
interested. Yeah, always something cooking. It
Yeah.
was great. So it was always something new to look at, so you didn't get bored.
Got it.
You know.
So what, I mean, for the people to help put it into context, Camila, we're like, where is Turkiye located? Where can people find on the map? And how did we get there? And what's funny enough is that actually we took Turkish Airlines. So, but we'll explain that. Camila will explain it. The other day on a NCAA basketball game, Turkish Airlines was the sponsor. And if you haven't seen the commercials, also with Morgan Freeman's, there are 7 deadly sins, that type of stuff. But now he's talking about Turkish Airlines. So they have made a concerted effort as a government, as a country, to also have people transit through Istanbul. You know, and even if you're going to Paris, they're like, stop for 24 hours in Istanbul. Come and find out about our culture.
I honestly recommend it because, I mean, I would say go to Istanbul or just Turkey in general for more than one day because there's so many things to see. But
Yeah.
I do recommend if you're gonna stop, I would stop in Istanbul. It's really phenomenal.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted a bit,
No,
but
that's fine.
tell us about Turkey.
Right. So Turkey
Or
is
Turkiye.
in southeastern Europe, but also southwestern Asia, and that was the interesting part of Turkey that I literally had no idea about. Istanbul is split in half by this huge river in between, and you have to take a ferry to get to the other side, or you have to cross this huge bridge. But there was only one bridge, right?
No, there were other bridges, but let's say
the main
that was
one
the
at
main one
least.
from the old city to
Yeah.
you, and the one that's most known with all the fishermen,
Right.
and that keeps on coming up in their pop videos as well as their soap operas, which your mum is enamored with.
Yes. So there's a split, and it's kind of funny because you go to one side and there's a culture there, and then you go to the other side and there's a completely different vibe there and
Correct.
a completely different culture. And I think that's what is really cool about Istanbul. It's just 2 completely different worlds, and then within those worlds there's worlds, and then within those worlds there's worlds.
Yes.
So it's a huge country, but Istanbul specifically is split between Europe and Asia, and then for the most part the rest of Turkey is in Asia. Like Cappadocia was in Asia, and we'll talk about where that is more, which is literally the middle of nowhere.
To help people
Literally.
understand, if you live in New York, or you have a mainland and an island, for example, and it's maybe a 15 to 20 minute boat ride, like within that 15 to 20 minute boat ride, you're on another continent. Now it sounds trippy, but it does feel that way, right? From both
you can see the difference.
the pace of the environment, the people, but the prices too. If you remember, the tea on the Asian side
was cheaper
than on the
Well,
European
okay,
side. But yes, but obviously we're in
there's-
more touristy
Yeah,
zones.
yeah. So they take advantage of that, considering you're in a very touristy place in the
Right.
old city and stuff. But tea was like what, 25? What was it? It was like 5 cents per person.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah,
And
at
then-
least on the Asian side.
Yeah, and then on the European side,
Uh-huh.
it was still pretty cheap. It was like $1 per person or 50 cents. I have no idea, but all I remember, I was like, whoa, when we got there, because we paid for food, and I was like, dude, this gets you like a Starbucks drink in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty bad, but yeah. So as I said,
That's another.
completely
I think you're bringing up a right point. Even though they've had, triple inflation,
and they
from
have
what I-
inflation. Like
and
what?
so and so we were paying the triple the prices that they had paid in the past, but to us it was still very, very economical and to the advantage of the dollar.
Right.
So we definitely took advantage of that, especially in a nice place.
Yeah. Where else are you gonna buy that much stuff? Like in Mexico? Not in this economy.
Yeah.
Not in this economy.
Well, no,
but in the Turkish
yeah.
economy, for sure.
For sure, yeah.
For sure.
So what else about the landscape of Turkiye, or just Istanbul, or also where we went to Central region, kind of just apart from these continental differences, or maybe going with that continental theme, it's a land with a lot of contrasts, right?
Well, I think that's also like plays into the history of the country, because so many empires tried to take over Istanbul, which was once Constantinople.
Right.
And So there's been a bunch of different cultures, a bunch of different people that have gone through there, and the Silk Road was also attached through that country. So I can't even imagine the amount of people that have been through there.
Mhm.
And I think there was just this sort of appeal, like the palace, for example, is on this really high point.
And that's a
I think-
Topkapi Palace.
Yes, I think it's one of the highest points in the city, and it was literally the perfect 360 of the city. So there was a lot of
Well, that wasn't
geographical
the
appeal.
palace. The palace had a good view, and especially coast to sea, and that's why it's very hard to like attack it or take
But
it
it was
over.
also
The
controversial
Galata Tower
because-
is the highest point.
Right. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
still, it was
Yeah.
one of the highest points if you look at, and that was one
Sure.
of the geographical appeals of the city for empires that wanted to come in. It was the palace was high up, and all the landmarks were high up, and it was just you could see your surroundings. So historically, it's just caused a lot of problems because there's been a lot of
Well-
fighting and a lot of things like that. But that's what makes it the country that it is.
Correct.
So it's cool.
Correct, and we can analyze that through going a little more in Istanbul. But just then to finish off, if you one thing that's striking, although they talk about it on Instagram and other things, is the amount of cats in the
Okay.
street, right?
I
So were you enamored?
it's
Were you
not-
appalled, or were you some people disgusted? What do you
Okay,
think?
you'd think it's not cleanly, but it's like the citizens feed the cats their own food,
Mhm.
and in my head I was like, okay, let's think about this. The citizens are getting good produce from what we saw in the market, so it's not like they're eating bad food. So technically, they're not feeding the cats bad food, which doesn't make them uncleanly cats. So I wasn't uncomfortable being surrounded by cats. Obviously, you're like, what? Because sometimes you would look at the store and there'd be a cat on one of the coffee tables. I'm like, in the middle of business? I guess,
Sure.
But it wasn't uncomfortable, and I didn't think it was uncleanly.
Well, I mean,
and the government takes care of them too, right? The
Sure.
government keeps track of them. So I was like,
no.
okay,
So
this seems like controlled chaos.
I gotta
you know?
correct you. The it's the dogs that attract. If you remember, it's the dogs. The
Oh.
dogs are massive.
No, but
and
I'm sure
the cats are not tracked. The cats, they kind of they're the second citizen of the city
well,
of
but
the
the
country.
government really has a
But they
set
track
of
the dogs,
problems, so
and if you saw in the dogs, remember they had the ears. They track the dogs, and the dogs,
the
are
dogs
just
are
massive,
huge.
massive.
Yes,
Yeah.
the dogs are huge. I don't know what they're feeding the dogs in Europe.
No,
But it's not-
they're feeding him the regular food that they're eating. And so
It's not the same as
they
here,
want to
though.
be really nice to them. That's what ends up happening.
Okay,
Too
well,
nice.
Yeah, Marcos fed one of them bread, and I think he followed us for
Yes, I think he followed-
a good 5 blocks.
A
We
good
were
5
like-
blocks. So we almost had friends. It was like 101
It was pretty
Dalmatians.
bad. Yeah, the cats are kind of mean though. Like they honestly just don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like you pet them, they're like, please, screw off.
What about the?
You know?
There were certain streets, obviously, where maybe there's less population, and there tends to be then a little more garbage and a lot of cats. So sometimes it did smell a little pissy.
Sometimes it did
Let's be
smell
honest.
like cat piss,
Yeah.
but usually cigarettes that smell overruled it.
Yeah.
So
the
it was
cigarettes
just-
do overall.
I remember that this, I don't know why, but the air of the city like messed up my hair. Like the amount of cigarettes that people were smoking with
Yeah.
the mix of the piss. By the end of the day, my hair was disgusting.
Yeah.
And the showers are so small. I was struggling. You see how much hair I had. I was struggling to wash my hair. On top of that, I had dyed my hair with henna. So my hair was staining the towels yellow. It was just a mess.
Well, you're the one who decided to do henna before going on a trip.
between
So
the
let's be
piss,
honest.
the cigarettes,
Mm.
and the city air, I guess. I don't want to say pollution because it didn't really seem polluted in that sense, but the pollution or the traffic of the air is just like gross.
Right.
But it's fine because it adds, and I wasn't ever upset with it. It was just kind of just like, okay, I guess this is part of the travel experience.
But apart from those small little things which are come with every big city, and what I retained from at least the overall trip, and before we go into the details, is just fantastic food, really nice people, and then that hustle and bustle of the trade, the Bosphorus, the amount of cargoes that you see in the morning also on the Marmara Sea. And we know it's oil transiting through there. Energy plays a big part. And then, what you mentioned in terms of the history and the geography, this has been kind of the center of the world where people have always wanted to dominate it, and there must be a reason because it's at the intersection of these places.
Well, they know they're like.
And they know they're important, so
Yeah,
there's a lot of there's a lot of pride there.
Yeah.
But speaking of pride and also of us maybe mixing pride and gluttony with talking about the 7 sins of Morgan Freeman, food. So what can you tell me about the food, and then I'll talk about the food history. What were your highlights in terms of the food, and we can continue talking about through the different parts, but tell me your highlights.
Well, so most of the food there was protein based, which was new for me because I'm not the type of person that usually goes for protein meals, I guess. And then the other option was usually just vegetables, which I also do not get down with most of the time. But I did give it a chance, and usually each plate just consisted of some form of protein in a kebab with rice, and it's either tomatoes or onions, and then a bunch of spices on top of it. I honestly don't think any of the meals that we had just like strayed from that. It usually just came back to that basis of construction on that plate, which was fine because it was great and it tasted so good. And yeah, so there was the Ottoman cuisine and then there was the Anatolian cuisine, right?
Right.
So there was a bit of a difference between the European and the Asian side. I not like specifically with the plates, but the taste, like I could just tell that I was like, oh, this is not the same.
Right.
You know, and maybe that's just the access that they have to products and stuff. The different cultures and stuff.
There's the different cultures, you know, depending if you're cold or hot, if you're closer to the sea, obviously you're in the central region, so then you're going to depend more on milk. You're going to depend on cattle. You're going to depend on the sheep. You're going to depend on lamb, right?
Yeah,
and remember, it's a non-pork eating culture,
right? Yeah.
So did I miss bacon? Did I miss pork chops? No, you know, I didn't really think about it.
Yeah, because it's so good. But I think my favorite thing, I had 2 favorite things again. My favorite thing that we had is chicken and vegetables that they cook inside of this clay pot, and it was literally completely enclosed.
Testi kebab is called.
Testi kebab, and they put it in fire or whatever, and they cook it for a really long time. And then the restaurant comes and they like whack the top off the thing, and they plate it for you. But the point was that the vegetables were cooked in the juices of the meat. So that was one of my favorite things. Again, that came with rice and tomatoes, but honestly one of my favorite meals. And then the restaurant that we went twice to, it was beef kebab, and there was this yogurt. I don't even know what it was, but it was this yogurt under it, and I ordered it both times that we went and absolutely destroyed it with a little bit of bread on the side. Absolutely destroyed, massacred. That was my 2 favorite things.
Yeah, so whether it's the kebabs, whether it's their bread, which I'll talk about, you know, and I'll insist upon at least one of the meals that we had, which is just absolutely fantastic. But then also they have, due to the proximity then to the Black Sea, to the Mediterranean, they'll mix in also the seafood, right?
Well, we didn't get to try a lot of the seafood because I was sort of hating on that fish sandwich that I saw everyone cooking on the street, and I was like, you know, I can't.
But what about the fish dish that I had for New Year's Eve that was cooked in the salt? That was delicious.
Yeah, I didn't try it. It looked good, but... Oh, wait. We had shrimp. These huge shrimp. I just remembered. On New Year's Eve. Those were really good. Those were garlic. I don't know what. It was kind of like the Turkish version of gambas al ajillo.
Gambas al ajillo, yeah.
In Spain.
But massive prawns.
And I was like,
they were like king prawns.
Yeah, like huge like prawns. And that was really good.
Well, that's
that was the only seafood.
They've got the bounty of the land, the bounty of the sea. They get Mediterranean, so then they get vegetables, olive oils. One thing that separates them is also breakfast tends to be with tomatoes, cheese, olives, cucumbers, cheese.
Yogurt, dry fruit.
And a lot of people are like, oh, really? But I'm like, think about it. Olive is a fruit.
Dude,
you know, the cucumber is very hydrating. When you've been asleep and you wake up, and then not to mention pistachios, the honey.
I don't really like pistachios, but I will say I ate every single dessert that we ordered with pistachios, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's saying a lot. Me not being a fan of meat products, and then pistachios, and I absolutely enjoyed both of them. And I actually ended up, by the end of the trip, like knowing what I wanted to order before we even got. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get a beef kebab because this is the shit, you know?
Correct. And why is the food so unique and so good is that really when you look at the history of the ancient Turks, they were nomadic culture, so they were more into mutton, which is a form of lamb, kind of heavier, gamier if you want, horse meat too, a lot of cattle, milk. And so then as they moved through the Central Asia then to the more Mediterranean areas and then started to discover like warmer weather, when they pushed up on the Aegean closer to the more Greek side and globalization there, and then also making it to Constantinople, now Istanbul, and getting then the seafood added to the diet through, and the influence as the world, you know, from the 49 BC all the way through to modern 1900s, then the European culture started coming through, and actually they used to sit on the floor, then they started sitting at the tables, they started changing also the way they ate and times and things like that. So, but they always made it, and I think that's why the tea culture, about sharing and about sitting down and about talking. And we see this obviously throughout many cultures, but they made it their own, right? They used that nomadic, especially in the palace, you saw, right? You saw how big the cuisine were. They were feeding over 10,000 people at some point every single day.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a very big deal. But one of the meals I wanted to insist upon, and one dish which I thought was unbelievable, and that's due to an off the beaten path and even a mistake in our GPS, is pide, which is their form of flatbread pizza, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like, you got to think about it almost like an American football type pizza shape.
And then it's like a boat
with crust at the end, and then filled in with whatever you want, lamb, minced meat, beef, and so that pide obviously comes from the 15th, 16th century when they were doing pita bread, but then as they developed their techniques, we see it appear in the 1850s. And we fell upon this very small restaurant, a mom and pop store, even grandma and grandpa store, forget mom and pop.
Yeah.
And,
okay,
you know, I hate to admit it because I'm French, but it was probably the best bread that I've tasted in my life.
Yeah. I mean,
and it was all for $20 to feed the family of 5.
I'm so glad we fell upon that little restaurant.
Right.
It was kind of a struggle though, because the lady literally did not speak English.
Right.
So they were so confused when we walked in the store trying to speak to them. They're like, what the hell are these people doing here? Which was fine. We figured out, like, we got a table and we're like, okay, like, we're getting there. And she would just point to things on the menu and tell us what to order. Like, she didn't let us pick what we wanted. She was like, you're gonna get that. So we were like, oh, okay. And then
it's like, I would like this. Like, no, you're having this.
Yeah, you know? Like, and then she would like watch you eat it. Like, you'd get the plate and then she'd wait for you to eat it. And I'm like, who are you? Like, okay. And you'd eat it and then she'd be like, okay, time out. And then she'd walk away. Like, I swear, not one leg of English, that entire thing. Yeah. But they gave us these little plates with these pickled pepper, spicy, I don't even know what they were.
Yeah.
But I ended up buying a whole bag of them and stuffing it in my suitcase. And I think I ruined like 2 shirts because the juices fell out. But so worth it because I had a huge mason jar when we came back.
They were delicious. Just
full of those pickled peppers. And if it wasn't for that lady in that restaurant, I wouldn't have brought that home with me.
Yeah.
So props to her, honestly.
So the pide and that experience was absolutely amazing. And then the last one is the Iskender kebab. Remember that we had at the Pudding Palace, so that comes from northwest Turkey, the town of Bursa. Actually, that's where Croatia recently played Turkiye. Unfortunately, Turkiye lost. But that's doner meat, which is kebab. Then it's laid over pieces of pide or pita bread. It's then smothered in a tomato sauce, which is then baptized with sizzling melting butter, and then served with a tangy yogurt. Yeah. That tangy yogurt with grilled tomatoes and green peppers. Now that sounds like a bit of a mess.
No, it sounds like shit, but it's not.
Yeah, like, it's delicious.
And you got the plate, and you're like, what the hell is this?
That was.
You know, like our tour guide was like, this is good, and I'm like, oh, okay, buddy. And then I ate it, and I literally was the first one to finish the plate, and I was like, I don't know what just happened, but
correct. And then obviously to go to more leading towards the desserts. I mean, we can't forget the simits, which are the Turkish bagels, which you can kill either in the morning or as a snack. You can get cream cheese.
The
or
citizens would eat them in the morning, but they
Yes.
would be selling them throughout the day. So
Yeah.
you'd want to get them in the morning. By the end of the day, they were a little bit stale because they've been out, obviously. And people would like judge you when you'd get a simit at the end of the day because you're like, "Are you stupid? Like you're supposed to get it at the beginning of the day, you know?"
But
so
it's delicious.
but it was so good. Any time of the day you need a little snack, have a simit.
And
Or
then
corn. They make corn on the street and acorn, and it's just like weird, but it was great. I ate everything on the street, and I was like, "This is so good."
A lot of Turkish street food, and then obviously the boys, and we have a great video with Matteo, their ice cream, which is called the dondurma, tends to be with that mastic, that natural gum paste, just more like a gelato feel to
It's
it.
like kind of like cheese.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Stretchy cheese. It's
But
weird.
then I love everything that had to do with pistachio, and the dondurma was and the knifes. So we'll talk about the trip to Asia too. Food will continue coming back, by the way. But hopefully that gives everybody a sense of, you're already seeing that this is very unique culture. It's a unique food place. And we really encourage folks to go see it and participate. But we wanted to, pass to the second kind of phase of this podcast and talk about, more about the Istanbul, but also Cappadocia, which we visited, which was felt like a magical experience in the morning.
Arsız arsız patlatıyor. Biz böyle mi gördük babamızdan, ele güne rezil olduk. Yeni adet gelmiş eski köye bak.